Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker. I'd like to welcome my three guests today: County Commissioner Justin Jones, Assemblyman William McCurdy, and City Councilman Brian Knudsen.
To me, compassion is being able to see those who are suffering and have the not only empathy, but also have the understanding that there needs to be change.
I think that it's really looking beyond yourselves to the plight of others, but also taking action. I mean,
compassion is an important word. I think passion is the part of the word that I really focus in on, because it's one thing to talk, it's another thing to complain about.
One thing that I notice is that we all have different districts, and it's kind of hard for folks who are in a comfortable situation to understand and also recognize the responsibility to make sure that we lift all boats.
Councilman Knudsen and I have been sort of banging our heads against the wall a bit in working on collaboration, trying to just get everyone bought into the concept of working together.
Political will is the thing that'll move our community, our state forward. I would also add on to that is trust. There's decades of mistrust amongst individuals and systems trust each other just like individuals do. And we have to develop a system from ground up. So what do we do in the interim when we don't actually have a system that's there? It's unfortunate that there's been a lack of foresight for generations now in Nevada and throughout the country.
I hear you. I'm glad that you bring that up. But how do we work together to actually restore people's trust in our institutions? And more importantly, how do we restore that trust in each other on a systemic level?
I think it's just this. It's talking, being vulnerable, saying, here are the issues, here are the challenges, help me find a solution. Help me figure out what the right path is. There's no one right path for everybody. It's coming together and saying, how can we come to the greatest amount of consensus, of agreeability, and then be passionate enough and courageous enough to say, here's the next step. Let's go. Get on board. Stop complaining. Let's figure out what the next step is. And if there are issues and things that are going wrong, let's acknowledge them. Let's talk freely and openly about them. And then say, here's ways that we can improve upon them.
I think that is a perfect segue into what I'd like to do next, which is really invite the three of you to inquire of each other. We'll start with naming one priority, and then how do we build that out? So, Assemblyman McCurdy, would you start with your one priority that you'd like to throw out there?
Thank you for the question. I believe that we won't be able to address the racial injustice until we start talking about the economic injustice that has happened in the community. And that is my opinion. And what I would like to do is work with my colleagues here on this platform, as well as other colleagues at other levels of government, to prioritize economic incentives, economic investment in low income census tracts across Clark County. People can do for self when they have an opportunity to do for self. And I believe that once we provide them with the economic opportunity that they are seeking, crime will go down. I believe that they will be busier. They will have more time to spend with themselves in terms of entrepreneurial opportunities that will be presented to them. And really and truly, we can unleash the genius and the untapped potential of many areas in our county. So to me, my priority is going to be addressing the economic condition of the people, all while realizing that we are experiencing one of the greatest pandemics that we've seen in some time. But I believe that if we are flexible and we are able to reimagine what justice looks like, I believe that we can get closer to a fix than where we are right now.
Absolutely. And we will get past this. There will be a tomorrow after the pandemic. So, Councilman, what would your priority be?
So I'm going to jump in and partner with future Commissioner McCurdy, because we share some space, and I 100,000% agree in investing in areas and communities that need investment in from an economic development perspective. healthcare, I think, is an amazing opportunity for our entire valley to improve upon. One, if we want to build out those mental health care and healthcare systems, we have to build the infrastructure to allow for healthcare to grow and thrive here in Southern Nevada, which currently is not. And it just so happens that healthcare is a booming industry. It's a great way to give people jobs. So if we build out the infrastructure for healthcare, whether it be sports medicine, which we need now because we have all these sports teams, whether it be children's services, which we are currently exporting children to other states to provide care for because we don't have the care here, or other specialty services. If we build out the infrastructure to allow those industries to thrive, it creates jobs. And it just so happens that the future commissioner and I share some space in the areas that we represent, and those areas need more economic diversification. Healthcare is a great way to do that. So it's easy to capitalize on each other's priorities and opportunities.
Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, I would echo my colleagues, Assemblyman McCurdy and Councilman Knudsen. There are so many issues that are of utmost importance and really cross over. When it comes to healthcare, I think that this COVID-19 pandemic has really exposed the inequalities when it comes to healthcare delivery in Southern Nevada. I can tell you, we would get on the county commission daily or weekly reports of where COVID-19 was having outbreaks, and it was very clear as we went into the June-July timeframe that the communities that were hardest hit by COVID-19 were Black and Brown communities. And we had to respond immediately to ensure that they got adequate access to healthcare and to testing. But the thing that I don't think that we're talking about enough is how much COVID-19 has exposed the divide when it comes to mental health services. So many of us were forced into our homes, and the mental health toll has been truly substantial. And I can tell you from frankly, we're talking about getting real and getting raw here. I have a family history of mental health issues and depression. And it was challenging for me and others in my own family, despite our ready access to healthcare services, to insurance, to find those services during the pandemic and even today. And so I think that we absolutely address healthcare across the board and mental health in particular in our community to really serve the needs of everyone.
Hope Means Nevada is doing a phenomenal job with addressing mental health in our communities. So that's one bright spot that we have. I really want to dive into this issue because I think the economic piece and the healthcare piece really do go hand in glove. People have suggested things like universal basic income, universal healthcare coverage. Is there something that the three of you could sign on to, that you could champion, that would make our city a more compassionate place to live and to work and, of course, to play, because this is Vegas?
I can, my thoughts on that, having worked with some of our federal delegation, is I think the most critical and important thing we can do as elected officials in Southern Nevada and Nevada in general is agree on top priorities and then arm our federal delegation with things to accomplish. So for an example, if we were all to agree that, say, graduate medical education or incoming, keeping residents here, because we now will have a medical school, if we keep residents here, that's federally funded. It's a symbolic gesture, but it's important and critical to an elected official to know that they have other elected officials that support what they're trying to accomplish. It's establishing those priorities and then arming each other and our federal delegation, first and foremost, of what is critical for Southern Nevada to be successful. So it comes back to trust, agreement, coming to some consistent messaging around what's our most important priorities.
Yeah, with regards to healthcare, everyone in our community does have access to healthcare. Clark County runs UMC Hospital, and so everyone can get care in the ER at UMC. Unfortunately, that is almost the worst place that people can get routine healthcare. And so we have to step up and provide more opportunities for people to get routine care somewhere other than in emergency rooms where it's extremely expensive and inefficient. And I applaud our former governor, Sandoval, and our current governor for continuing Medicaid expansion. But we to really take the next step, which is providing an option for folks so that everyone can have the same access to healthcare coverage. And I think that's something that we need to work with our federal delegation on, and with our hopefully future president. And
I echo what both my colleagues have said here regarding healthcare access and the availability to folks who are in need. I had an opportunity to work within the healthcare industry for quite some time, and I can definitely say that there are a lot of folks who utilize the emergency room like it's a primary care physician. And what that does is it puts more strain on the facility. It puts more strain on our frontline healthcare professionals. And all in all, they're not getting the adequate and routine care that they need. So I am looking forward to working with everyone to improve the access to care issue that we have currently within the state of Nevada. And also, commend both, former Governor Sandoval and current Governor Sisolak on the Medicaid expansion, continuing with that. But one thing that we can do is, after we get past this election and the dust settles, so to speak, we're going to have to really get together around a table or, virtually like this, to have an adult discussion on some shared priorities. And sometimes that is not easy because we all have different priorities. But I do believe if we can agree on the basics of what our shared constituents need to not only survive, but thrive, I believe that, we'll be able to make some great progress in this state. So that we know, economics is a major piece of everyone's thought process daily. Because if you cannot provide for yourself, your mental health is not right. We know that we have to look at food insecurity. Food insecurity is real, and it has also been exposed during this pandemic. We see that we were running out of food like this. As soon as things started, we had, few hundred cars deep. We started to run out of food. So how can we plan for a more resilient response to whether there, when there is an emergency or disaster? And I believe that going through this and evaluating and taking notes, we'll be able to come back after the new year and start planning for the future to become a more resilient county that looks at infrastructure, that looks at food security or insecurity rather, and looks at the economic diversification that needs to be had in order for us to continue to reinvent ourselves and be the destination county, if you will. So there's a lot of opportunity. It's not all gloom and doom. And with the leaders that we have here on this phone call and others who share some of the same priorities that we have, I believe truly and sincerely that we will be able to take our county to the next destination, if you will.
You mentioned a key phrase, shared priorities. In the last 10 minutes or so, we have addressed the economic situation and healthcare. And it seems as though this is certainly something that is a shared priority between the three of you. And you recognize that it is all interconnected, from infrastructure to education. We've identified that. And I'm so excited that we've kind of nailed something down in a sense. What can we do now to move this forward?
I would say, obviously, we're a few months out from the legislative session. There are definitely still opportunities to really come together, local government, state government, elected officials, and identify what those priorities are going to be and how do we really tackle them. And so I think that now is the time to have those conversations, ongoing conversations, with regards to what the priorities for the next legislative session are going to be. The governor, our legislative leaders, and Southern Nevada leaders together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The planning starts now, because once the session starts, our current commissioner, former senator, knows that it goes fast.
I would jump in and say one of the best lessons I got is it's that Wayne Gretzky quote is know where the puck is before you, I can't remember the quote, but the puck, something about a puck. But I learned that in public policy, it's trying to figure out where decision makers are going to be in about 10 years and mapping out the systems and the programs that'll be eligible for funding. And so if we can do our very best to think about where our Congress is going to be in 10 years and planning out Las Vegas so that we're ready and able to apply for federal funding, we can tackle one of our biggest challenges in Nevada, which is being one of the least funded per capita than anywhere else in the country. That means less tax dollars coming back than we rightfully deserve. And it's because we're not prepared to take in money from the federal government. So it has everything to do with preparing local and state leaders for the 21 session, but also mapping out where we're going to be in 2031. And how do we start preparing for that now? Because government moves slowly and we need to be there when they're ready to go.
And just real quick, I neglected when I said we need to get together with our state leaders. We also have to be real when we have these discussions that we're not always the experts, and we need to turn to the people who are really the experts when it comes to finance, when it comes to economic expansion, when it comes to healthcare. We're all elected leaders, and we have our skill sets, but we also hopefully know where our skill sets are not, and we need to turn to the Gwynn Center, turn to UNLV, turn to LVGA, turn to those organizations and experts to get their help as we go forward.
Assemblyman, please.
I was just going to say one thing that I have learned in my time in the legislature is that there are a lot of areas where we can invest our dollars as a state, where we can get matching dollars from the Fed. So I believe as we work with the stakeholders and the experts, we should prioritize areas where we know, let's just say we get a 3-to-1 match. We invest $1, we get $3 back from the Feds, to put up a program of some sort. And it's in various areas. I know that we get a lot of federal dollars back when we invest in mental health service. I know, there are a lot of areas. Workforce development, that's another area. So we have to get together when we have these discussions and also put that on the table and look at where are we missing out on the additional federal support where we can actually get a better bang for our buck, if you will. So that is something that we should definitely also be looking at when we engage in these conversations. And I know that you asked, where can we start? Where can we immediately start moving the needle? And I am looking forward to working with the councilman on his medical education district. I think that that's a phenomenal concept. It's rooted and grounded in fact, and I believe that it will provide additional federal resources for us to continue to provide the workforce of the future. And we know, again, like he stated, that we do have a healthcare provider shortage here in the state. So how can we incentivize folks to stay and be a resident here in the state of Nevada to provide care to those who are most in need? So that is one area where we can immediately get to work and make change. I believe it will also foster economic development and also economic investment from other areas. So that is, if you will, low-hanging fruit for us to get to work on.
What do you need from your colleagues to get started on that?
That project is already, Councilman Knudsen is already working on it. I can assist him on my side of the county where we have some shared interest and where I can be helpful. And I know that it is going to be successful, but I will let the councilman speak to that idea, if you will.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the building blocks. It's trust, it's compassion. So it's being able to be vulnerable and susceptible. And luckily, we have 2 commissioners on the call now that I trust implicitly because I want to and because I have to, because I can't do it on my own. The city can't do much of anything on its own. It requires the collaboration. And so it's a pleasure to be able to work with people you trust. And from that, everything magical happens. You trust someone, you talk to them. Ideas are more poignant, they're more available, and when energy strikes, it strikes fast and furious, and you got to be ready to take advantage of it. And so this is the first of many steps between the city and the county. And there's hundreds of examples of the city and the county and elected officials working together to make Nevada what it is now. And it's a great place. It's amazing. We can be better. And this is how it happens, is by earning trust and following through on what you say you can and can't do.
So a couple of things have come up: political will, trust, and collaboration. Those seem to be kind of some pillars that are really rising. This particular podcast was really birthed out of our town hall series. And one of the things that really just became the theme of questions is really about justice. And so that includes healthcare. That includes the economic justice. It includes environmental justice. All of that is a piece. We have a fantastic police department, and I've had the opportunity to talk with many police officers in our city who really believe in compassion, and it's been so inspiring. Of course, we've got the DA. We've got Hope for Prisoners, which is getting a lot of national attention right now. So that rehabilitation aspect. One thing that we seem to have an opportunity to build is restorative justice. And that taps into the school system, that taps into our healthcare system, and of course, law enforcement.
So I'll just say on the county side, a year or two ago, our juvenile justice program put together the Harbor, which is really an opportunity for kids who are having issues in school to be diverted from being in the criminal justice center, the juvenile justice system. And the Harbor has been award-winning. We've expanded it to 4 locations across the valley, just opened locations on East Flamingo and North Las Vegas in the last few months. And I think the Harbor is really a great model for how to go forward with the adult criminal justice system and the restorative process for diverting people early on before they really have interactions, so that we can make sure that people are able to move on with their lives, both as the perpetrators and the victims.
If I agree with everything the commissioner said, and fully supportive of really everybody in our community. Everybody deserves a chance to be successful. One of the interesting challenges that I didn't really think a whole lot about before coming into office, but has become very clear to me, is this idea of land use. And so restorative justice, it's wonderful to talk about. And then the next difficult conversation is, where do you put it? Where is it? Because it's something that happens between 2 people, which means it has to occur in a place, at a place. And finding the place for it to happen where you don't have your constituents angry at you is a challenge. And so I want to real quickly talk on an item that came before City Council, where we approved about 400 units of attainable housing, if you will, low-income housing, multifamily, and senior housing. And it was Democrats and Republicans alike that came out and adamantly opposed anything that was going to potentially bring down the value of their homes. And so it's this interesting question about if we can develop a robust restorative justice system in Nevada, defining what that looks like and then defining where it goes. It requires an incredible amount of political will to stand up and say, I realize as a neighborhood, you may not want this near you, but in Nevada, we have to make sure that individuals have access to services. We have to make sure that individuals have access to a transit system and food and education and healthcare. And if they are entering into society, they have to be part of society. Very difficult conversation, and requires an incredible amount of trust between those agencies that provide restorative justice, the neighborhoods that will be near it, and the systems that will hopefully support individuals that re-enter society successfully.
But one thing that I have witnessed in my time, I grew up in a very majority minority area in the historic West Side. One thing that I found is that, and this is just my opinion, America has never wanted to realize the wrongs that it has done to underrepresented communities, to Black communities, to Latinx community. And that is an example of not wanting to realize that there is a problem. And also when a solution is presented, but that solution, which takes a lot of political will, which is what we discussed earlier. So it is going to take a lot of communication before things are presented. We're going to have to get out into our communities. We're going to have to knock on doors. We're actually going to have to make ourselves vulnerable and helping others to see, like, hey, this is something that we can do and that we should do that is also going to be beneficial to all of us. Because let's just say if someone goes to prison, which is, under the old model, supposed to be a reformative model to be able to reform that individual. But then we don't, we didn't before the last legislative session want them to have the right to vote, which is giving them power and agency over themselves to select who their representatives should be. So we are going to continue to have these conversations. We are going to have to be honest. We are going to have to be vulnerable, which, actually helps you to create trust, because you cannot trust someone and not have vulnerability towards them. So we have to be more vulnerable towards one another. You realize that our shared prosperity or demise is all interconnected between one another. So it is a task that is heavy. Sometimes it's not popular, but it is also needed in this moment that we're in. And I believe that this is a moment where we can reinvent ourselves and reinvent the type of work that we are doing in the community.
What I just heard from both of you is that we really need to help Las Vegas, the county, the state, be more compassionate, to live up to our ideals. Because if you have people that are concerned that, oh, my property value, well, that's not an evidence of compassion. That's an evidence that they are self-compassionate, perhaps at best, but self-centered, if we're going to be frank. So what can we move forward to encourage the various groups that you all represent to embrace compassion as a virtue? Maybe that's what we should look at.
For me, it's that's going back to the same thing, is being able to talk about it openly and freely. Here are the challenges, here are the opportunities. Not everyone will be happy, but is it best for the overall society? And are we righting the wrongs of our past selves? Because there are many wrongs in Nevada, there are many wrongs in this country, and we, I think, in my humble opinion, are elected to right those wrongs and make this world a better place. And that requires being very courageous and also just being incredibly open and honest and transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And in my experience, if you're open, honest, and transparent, people may be upset for a little while, but they understand. They want the world to be better. Their self-interest comes first, and you have to sometimes overcome that.
I agree. I totally agree. Sometimes people are inherently just selfish, and and people are, that also comes to how you were raised, how you were brought up. Be concerned with self first, then worry about others. But as we see people continue to live a life, a quality of life, we have to help others understand that we have to work together to make sure we improve the quality of life for everyone. And granted, some people don't want help, and that's fine. We can't force, support and help on folks who don't want it. But for those who would like to have an opportunity to improve their situation, for those who would like to participate in a discussion that makes them all vulnerable, we would be able to get to this place where we are envisioning a more compassionate, a more passionate society, and a more sincere society. We have to be truly and sincerely concerned about the well-being of our neighbors. How are we treating our neighbors? When we see someone who is, without food, are we taking $1 out of our pocket to buy them a meal or a salad or a sandwich? Or what are we doing to help those who are in need? And that's how I try to live my life. The best decision that I've, been taught to make is a fair one. At the end of the day, we have to be willing to just do what is fair. And oftentimes what's fair is right. So we have to continue these conversations. It starts with the conversation, because throughout history, if you look, the first thing that happens before a war is a failure of communication. When both sides stop talking, that is the start of a war throughout history over thousands of years. So we have to keep the door of communication open And we have to be able to listen to each other without, going off into an argument, and just realize that, yes, we do have different opinions. And yes, that is okay. But the question is, how are we going to voice our opinions and still make progress? And that is the balance that we have to make as policymakers and as folks who are in the community on the ground, understanding what are the issues that are going on, and then take that back to our chambers to figure out how we can advance an agenda. Because at the end of the day, love is an action word. If I love you, I'm going to show you that I love you. If I love you, I am going to make moves to make sure that you know that I love you. And that's what we have to do. We have to show love from our positions of power. We have to speak truth from a position of power to people in power. And that is our responsibility.
And I don't have any solutions for how we make people more compassionate. But to a certain extent, I don't want that to get in the way of what our jobs are as elected officials. And I think you see this a lot in land use decisions. The neighbors who might be around a proposed project are the ones that are going to be showing up with their pitchforks in opposition to a multi-use product, something where folks who are of lower income might benefit from. The developer for that project might be there at the zoning meeting, but it isn't the 400 residents who might take advantage of that property who are represented at that meeting. It's only the neighbor with the pitchfork. And so I think we, in our land use decisions, we need to do a better job of making sure that the entire community is represented and not just those who are most directly affected, in order to ensure that all of us as decision makers on these types of projects are getting the entire perspective of our community, so that we make the right decisions, that it's not just the loudest voices in the room, it's really all of the voices in the community. I've tried to do that in my district. I've had a number of low-income housing projects that are proposed, and I have asked that representative groups come and participate in those, but it's challenging. I think we need to do a better job in that respect.
I absolutely agree. And I just want to note that we are coming to the close of our time together. But I think what you just said is so important, that engagement, actually having the people that are affected have a place, feel included, and feel safe. And that's really building on trust. And I think the way that you build that trust could potentially be through compassion. So if each of you would just, in a one or two sentences, and I know that I always ask that and it's like a paragraph, but that's okay. If you could just share what you think we need to do from this point forward to increase engagement so that Las Vegas could be more compassionate.
The most important thing is obviously to lead by example. We are in these positions of power because the people elected us to them for a reason. And we can't expect the people who elected us to these positions to be compassionate to their neighbors if we aren't doing so. And so I know my colleagues and I are all committed to showing that compassion to the people in our communities that are least able to speak up. And so I think that's what we really need to do is be examples.
I'm about getting something done. I know it takes a while, but I think we've arrived there. Committing to modeling compassion, would it be possible for you to become involved? And I don't know exactly how this would work or how to even flesh this out right now, but the idea really would be, as compassionate elected officials, perhaps to put that in your signature line, or have a social media campaign or something around that says the three of us are going to lead compassionately, and we're recruiting all of our colleagues to join it.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a great idea. I also think that there are other opportunities. Like I said, the city and the county are both going through their master planning processes. And I think that compassion to other members of our communities has to be a part of that 2050 vision for our community.
No, I was going to just say that, I really like where Will was going with this. Maybe we can just become the compassionate caucus. Yeah, that has a ring to it. But truly, it is needed, right? Because if you do not have compassion, you cannot lead in a way that is going to be beneficial to the people that you're responsible to and responsive to. But one thing that I would like to say as we close is that I want voters to know that we have to change the way that we see politics. We have to change the way that we do politics. We have to not only cast our vote on election day and during early voting, but we also have to take time and, put on our calendar one day to show up for a meeting, one day to be active and engaged in the process of how things are changed within our community. Because if we are not showing up, then we cannot get the change that we are seeking. Today, in 2020, October 15th, we are still benefiting from the progress and from the activism and from the intentionality of those who came 60, 50 years ago. We are still benefiting from that progress. So we have to stay engaged even after we cast our vote. We have to continue to organize ourselves and our communities. And we have to get together, truly get together and have discussions about what we are feeling in our homes. And at the end of the day, I know that people are concerned about whether or not they're going to be able to put food on the table, whether or not they're going to be able to take care of their kids, and whether or not their kids are going to be afforded a quality education. That is important. That is on the forefront of our minds as community members. And I put myself in that because I care, and those are the things that I think about. So compassion, and we have to be intentional about our actions for the people.
Councilman, last words.
And I very much appreciate those on the call. I agree with everything that was stated. I would add on to that there's so many people in our community that don't care if they live in the city of Las Vegas or Clark County, and they don't care who I am, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, they have to focus in on making their children and themselves most successful, and my job is to go to where they are. And so that is harder than it sounds, because there's only so much time in the day. And there's so many people that desperately need to be heard. And so I think that's one thing I think is important for being a compassionate leader, is going out to where those people are, and identifying what are the things that will have the greatest impact on their quality of life, meeting them where they are. And so that's important to me as far as identifying as the Compassionate Caucus, signing my name as a compassionate leader. Yes, of course, anything that Gar Jamison says too, yes, because he is the North Star in our community that says what is right from wrong, and is helpful to know how to lead by example. And again, I would go back to, we are one Nevada, one Southern Nevada, and at the basis, we are all human beings. When you sit down and listen to everybody, we all really do want the same things, which is to be able to take care of ourselves and our families. And as elected leaders, we have enormous influence over that, whether people know it or not. It's our job to reach out and find out how we can make their lives better.
We have a surprise here, and I'm surprising him with this. But Gar Jamison is actually on the podcast today. So would you please just close us out with a few words?
Compassionate Caucus, I love it. I want to say that I think we're in the midst of a realization, which is that systems of domination no longer work, and that systems of collaboration and partnership and engagement are the systems of the future. And I want to encourage all of the viewers to look at a book by Rian Eisler, Nurturing Our Humanity, which suggests we need to change the narrative. And I think, William, you were speaking to that. We need to let people know that fear is not the dominating emotion of our thoughts or our emotions. That love, as you said, William, is the dominating emotion if we let it in. So I want to encourage all of our listeners, and I want to thank our participants for their engagement with this value. I believe compassion is the North Star of the future, and that we have a huge opportunity, a legacy, in fact, in this generation to show our community, our state, and perhaps our nation and the world that Las Vegas leads in terms of an engaged community. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank each of you for your time today. And for this is actually being recorded prior to an election, so busy schedules. And I just want to offer my sincere appreciation and gratitude for making this a priority and for being a part of this podcast and for caring about our community. Each of you are amazing human beings. And that to me is the heart of our city. We are a city, a county, a state of amazing human beings. This is the Compassionate Las Vegas podcast. And I want to thank you for listening and for watching and for getting involved and making our city a more compassionate place to live, to work, and play.